this before. Some of you haven't. It's nice and easy. It just uses one heading, so we don't have to have that different heading, first and second page. All we've got to have is our last name and the page number. Make sure you insert the page number, just like we did with the APA. Don't just type it in, because if we type in one, that's going to be on every page. And the only heading we have is just on this first page, so name, professor, class, and then the date. And she calls this Life Does Not Wait on Time. So titles, they're tricky. They're kind of an art, but you don't want to name it. We're not going to name this Our Time Is Up. That's the name of that movie. It's already taken. Can't do it anymore. Well, technically you can, but not on your essay, okay? We're going to name it something different that has to do with the essay. So Melissa, and often titles will come like after you're done, something like that. But let's take a look at how Melissa does this, because this structure is what we're looking at. Time is everything to people who live on a strict schedule. It is through time people can see what is next in their day. Focus is given on a clock and panning into a daily ritual of a man in the opening scene of Our Time Is Up. Now here, that is my bad. I haven't changed that. Well, no, I know it's correct. MLA does not distinguish between a short film and a long film. Now I've taught you short stuff, long stuff. I know. Again, I don't make the rules. If I made the rules, big things. But they're just like, oh, it's a film. We're just going to put it in italics. All right? So when you put a title of a film in your paper, you put it in italics. If you were handwriting it, you'd underline it. That's why we do like this. Big thing. Okay? So Our Time Is Up. So you've got to have, one of the things you have to do when you're analyzing anything, and especially a certain work of art, whether it's a painting, a statue, a film, a story, a novel, you got to name that thing and get that in the first paragraph. I don't care if this was Life Does Not Wait on Time, use of mise-en-scene in Our Time Is Up. I don't care if that was her title and it has the title in it. Even if it said Our Time Is Up, directed by, oh snap, we need to have that director in there because that director's like that author, Rob Perelson. So even if that's in the title, always put that in that first paragraph. All right, so she gives us, look, here's what happens. This clock is merely an element of mise-en-scene, and this goes in italics because I didn't get the scene in italics, that part is. Because it's foreign language, that's French. Be all fancy, we write in a foreign language, put it in italics. In our English paper, okay, in which the viewer can begin to understand just how things or objects relate to identifying the character with a particular personality. In fact, this and other aspects of the decor give the film its structure and say more than words alone can. That's the thesis. After Melissa watched this film and probably watched it a couple of times, she said, wait, what is it that really stands out here for me of all these different elements of film? She said, one of the things that I see happening is I see this use of mise-en-scene. Part of it's the decor. It's really telling us more about this guy, right? It is informing us about who this guy is. So here she's talking about character, one of those kind of traditional things which we look at in literature, but she's talking about it through these elements of film. And so you've got to have that introduction that gets us in there and says, who are we talking, what are we talking about, what's our topic? And so she starts with just kind of, instead of the idea of just this is used in film, and that is perfectly fine way to start. If you're not sure where to start an essay, then think about what is this kind of really about overall. Well, this essay is going to be about film for everybody, right? That's the one we're going to write. So you can start about film in general, but which film specifically? And so what are you looking at? If you try to look at all of those elements you read about in the vocabulary, how long is that paper going to be? Dude, a long-ass paper if you're going to say anything about them, right? Now, we're writing a really short, focused paper. So you want to decide what is it that stands out. Well, Melissa watches this, and she's like, oh, man, that mise-en-scene, the things we see in the scene. And she says, and the question is, what does it do? So what, it's there. Every film has mise-en-scene unless it's just a black screen forever. Right? We see stuff in a film. So that's there, big deal. But here's what she says, is that it's used they're an element of mise-en-scene in which the viewer can begin to understand just how things or objects relate to identifying the character with a particular personality. These things show us Dr. Stern's personality. In fact, this and other aspects of decor give the film structure and say more than words can. So that's her thesis. That's her promise. In the end, she's got to show us, how do these show us more than just words, right? What are these things showing us about who Dr. Stern is? Now, she's not going to retell the film. We all watched it. Do we need her to retell us what happened? No, not at all, right? What we need her to explain what goes on. So the clock shot transitions into a pan of a man's tediously organized life while dissolving through images from his closet. As with edited transitional wipe scenes of his well-organized closet, we see orderly hung white dress shirts, aligned ties, and a rack of dress shoes through to an extreme close-up of a thermostat, then onto a cup of brewing coffee. So here she's just saying, remember this part? This is when you're talking to your friends about that movie you've watched over and over again together, and you say, remember that part. You're not telling them the whole movie, but remember that part. So she says, look, here's one of the things we see in mise-en-scene. From the opening scenes alone, the viewer gets an understanding of a man who is set in his way of living by organization and structure. As viewers, we notice through changing tilt, the depth of field remains in deep focus to display all the elements of his living while he's busily tracked quickly from shot to shot. So these are the things we see. These are the messages it's giving to us. Notice she doesn't say, I, me, my. Just like with that research essay. This is that formal writing. Do you know that those are Melissa's thoughts? Yeah, she put her name on top of the paper, right? So we don't even need that. And when she talks about how it has effect, she's doing it collectively, the viewer or viewers, that kind of thing. And then she's got to wrap it up here. She says, through mise-en-scene, the perception of his character is that Dr. Stern is not only a structured man, but a busy one. So what is that giving us? That first scene we just rewatched, it's just stuff. And the first time you watched it, you're like, stuff. But at the same time, when you watched it on Monday, didn't you, before you even got words from this guy or saw his face, didn't you have a clue to really kind of what the guy was like? Does your closet look like that? Everything in your life organized that way? Sometimes, man, I've gone through phases. I just was a little too uptight. For some people, this works, right? I'm not saying it's bad. It's very organized. He is that kind of person. That's what he is. And before we ever see his face or hear his voice, we already know that. And that's very powerful, that just in like 30 seconds of something, we get who somebody is without really seeing that person. Then she moves on and she says, Dr. Stern's first form of dialogue prepares the audience for his monotone yet busy personality. Excuse me. The cleanliness of his home and office appears to only be the background on just how routine his life is. While the audience begins to get a humorous feel for Dr. Stern through the cleverly edited diegesis and sound bridge from him in varying discussions with his patients, they also begin to feel the connection of his acclimatized monotone personality. The images in his home, so again, she's saying, okay, we get this feel of monotone, but what else, right? We get that through dialogue, through what he's saying, but remember at the first she said, look, sometimes this stuff we see is even more powerful than dialogue. And so she's coming back to that. The images of his home and office, day in, day out, go without change, just as his conversations with his patients do. And so here she's saying, look, we can look at this and it's the same. It's the same. As he goes through all of these patients, we see his personal interaction, and that tells us about him. But we're always seeing his home. We always see him sitting in that same way, reacting in the same way to the different patients. It's with the cut-in of a telephone ringing from his office that the viewer begins to notice change within the film. The following day, Dr. Stern's environment begins to gradually become less structured and more carelessly placed or disheveled. So now she's just transitioning us to that next scene, which is that same one that we got in the first, that clock, but this one's different. The clock again begins a new point in a scene from Dr. Stern's structure to carelessness. As the clock buzzes and the frames transitional right through his closet, home, and back to his office, the viewer realizes Dr. Stern has remained still since his notification of 6 weeks to live. As the film continues, the diegesis of Dr. Stern's world changes. His attitude begins to open up a new personality that is freedom from concern in his actions and words. The background decor also changes from his once maintained closet and shoes and his reading material of the psychology journal to a magazine with no real content and no glimpse of his closet or shoes. Through the film, elements of mise-en-scene like his decor, what do? That's the key thing. Not just these things are there. You got to say that. But it's always about what do they do? What message are they creating? Like his decor, give the viewer the emotion the character is feeling and reveal his experience without saying anything about it. Eventually, at the end of this film, it is mise-en-scene, like the decor in the closet or the props like the clock, which sets the tone in the character's evolving life. Symbolically, we notice the clock is no longer the character's concern, nor is his appearance, personal views, living conditions, or his career. In the end, it's the fact that now the Dr. Stern, a once busy man who led a well-structured life, is finally taking time for himself and actually helping those he's counseled for years to overcome their fears through his honesty and carefree attitude. So that terminology plays a role, and as we go through, that's what you want to learn and kind of think about. Think about how we look at things when we go through these films today and next time, and then next week we'll hit our film we're going to watch to write about. Think about how do you see these things in here, and this is why we go through a number of films over the next couple of days to practice this, because nobody's born knowing how to do this shit. You cannot just open your mind to the collective unconsciousness out there and it will come to you. No, it didn't work for math either. So, yeah. So thinking about how to use the wording, but also thinking about this structure. That this structure is that introduction that lets us know what we're talking about. Even if that title has the title, even if the title of your essay has the title of the film in it, you still need to tell people what you're talking about. What is your main point? What is your thesis? In the end, after you've thought about this, for Melissa, what did she think about this mise-en-scene, these things that we see in the scene, that decor? What is that saying about Dr. Stern and how does it work? And then in the end, just bringing it all together overall. So we go through those body evidence, provide some examples, discuss them. Provide them, discuss them. Provide them, discuss them. When you need to develop an essay further, you just do more and more and more of that over and over and over again. And then at the end, wherever her paper ends, Control-Enter, she's going to have that new page, and she's going to have a works cited page. Now, if you had more than one work, you would put works, but she just has one, so all we need is the works cited.